Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Susan James, Library Manager here at Bayliss and Assistant Director of the Superior District Library. I'd like to, of course, thank Judy Merrill-Smith for speaking tonight, agreeing to be our featured poet, the Friends of Bayliss for the refreshments, and the library's program committee for help with arranging everything. We have a bunch of events I wanted to mention. This Thursday, the Sioux City Manager Oliver Turner has office hours here, starting at 7 p.m. if you have any questions or concerns to talk to him about. Also, Thursday at 7 p.m. in the main room is our adult coloring event, so if you're interested in participating, that's proving to be pretty popular and will continue beyond October. Judy Merrill-Smith was born and raised in New Hampshire. She's lived all over the country, but she considers herself a Yooper by marriage. 3 years ago, she and her family moved to UP. Her professional work has been centered on writing and editing. She's also a visual artist working in textiles and photography. Recently, she started the business One Starry Tree, selling hand-dyed clothing and other items. She volunteers at Alberta House Art Center, participates in Creative Endeavors support group for writers and artists that meets here at the library, and is a regular reader at our Superior Poetry Cafe open mics, as well as at Pickford Community Library. There'll be an open mic after her reading, where you may perform if you so desire. There's a sign-up sheet at the back. We have about 4 people signed up. Please welcome Judy Merrill-Smith. Okay.
Yeah, in a small room like this, I project and I don't want to blast you out with a mic, so. So I'm going to skip it.
You can move it further if you like.
Oh, is that okay?
Yeah, it's however you like.
Thanks. So I kind of wanted to keep this rather informal. Feel free to jump in, ask questions, ask me to read it again, whatever as you go. I mean, it's such a small group, you might as well take advantage of it being an intimate setting and, you know, let it rip. So the first one that I'm going to read tonight is appropriately for the season. It's called Fall. In this moment, fall is brown, rustling, frosty, quiet. Time for the world to rest. Clouds and fog shroud these days, veiling the sun, hushing the sky. Crunching leaves underfoot, I want to defy my urge to hibernate. Sleep beckons me. The squirrels still play even as they gather their harvest. I too can store my gladness and crack the shell open in the middle of winter, a feast to share at my table. So you'll recognize quickly that I tend to write a lot of seasonal stuff. I'm very, very inspired by nature. This is called Thawing. My heart is thawing like a snowbank in March. Drips escape, but refreeze each night. Probably gonna be a puddle for a while. A child in mud boots will stomp grieving droplets everywhere, and the spray will trickle to tree roots and nourish birds and midwife mosquitoes and summon rolling summer thunderstorms and power rainbows, and come back to me after long travels to beat a pulse in my veins once again. It seems to me that, at least in the last few years, I've been writing a lot of March poems. March and April. And like August is another time I write a lot of poems. And I don't know why, maybe it's just because it's that urge to move out of the season that you're in and move into the next one. And I'm kind of like a little kid. This next poem is, ever since I remember doing this, like first grade even, whenever the ice starts to melt in the spring, I like to, there'll be these like little narrow shelves of ice like along a sidewalk or whatever, and you can see where it's melted and refreezed. And so it's sort of hollow underneath. I love to go and stomp the ice and crush it all up and kick it around, and I've always done that, and I still do it. And I've fallen down doing it too. So a couple years ago I decided to write a poem about it, and it's called Ice Stomp March. I smash ice. My feet hunt for thawing ice slabs everywhere I walk. I crash down my boot heel like a sensei shatters a board. Glittering shards slide away, free to dissolve on sun-warmed earth. I am a petulant child, hoping no one watches as I secretly hone my stomping, impatient dance. Kicking a tooth out of winter's jaw, I open a hole for spring to slip in. So as Susan mentioned, I consider myself a Youper by marriage. I've been up here for 3 years now. But I've been coming up here for like 30 years. My husband and I met in Ann Arbor during grad school, and we've lived all around the country and have finally moved here. His family still lives here in Pickford. And it's been an interesting education for me, because being up here for a couple months a year versus being up here all the time is, of course, very different. But I have found it to be really satisfying in some respects, because we lived out west for a long time, and of course the climate's really different there, and moving back to the Midwest, it's closer to what I grew up with in New Hampshire, and it's a little more comfortable for me, and I like the way the seasons change here. So I'm not a fan of the winter, but you know, who is? So I found it a kind of a challenge. I like I haven't been writing a lot of poetry. When I was a kid, I wrote a ton, and I was an English major. But I really didn't write very much poetry for about 20 years. And in the last few years, I've been getting back into it, and so it's been nice to be someplace that's, I feel that connection to what I grew up with, and now it's a different, slightly different environment, but I feel those connections, and it helps me, you know, bring back the poetry that I haven't done for a very long time. So this is another sort of early spring nature one, and it's called Easter Sunday Drive. Raining puddles, fields of shallow lakes full of geese and ducks, sandhill cranes bending, always bending, to pluck up mouthfuls of barely spring. A deer carcass on the side of the road, neck twisted backwards, eyes wide open, gazing across at its classmates grazing in a hayfield. They almost look like small cows waiting for a farmer to call them in for the evening milking. We see more deer at the cemetery, loping under the spruce trees, hoping for any green tender enough to feed their wintered hides. Longing for softness, warmth, birdsong mornings. The fawns squirm in their bellies. The ancient roiling call of the cranes beckons them. Come join us, little ones. We honor and greet you soon, soon, soon. And I guess this is my first stab at a real Youper poem. I've lived in very few places that have as much rust on the vehicles as here. And it's astonishing to me how they still stay together, you know, as bad in shape they're in. So one day I was walking down M129, I live on M129, Bruce Township, and I was walking down the road, and a pickup flew by me, and the back fenders were so loose and rusty that they were kind of flapping. And it was like, ooh, I don't want to be too close in case something comes off. But that was the impetus for this little poem. It's called Pick Up on M129. There's more ain't than is about that truck. If those rusty fenders flap hard enough, maybe the whole thing will lift off and fly toward the junkyard. No tow necessary. I'm also, I'm definitely a spiritual person, and it informs everything I do. It informs my artwork, it informs my poetry. I've only been a visual artist for real for about probably under 10 years. That was something I got into later in life. But poetry's always been a place for me to express all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And sometimes I'm a little exuberant. So I think this one kind of, this poem kind of reflects my more let it fly attitude that I've started to take over the last few years. It's called Firework. Leaking into the night sky like a hissing balloon, a weather vane gone crazy, or a rooster who's lost all sense of crowing time, I shoot out half-cocked, not sure of aim or target or direction, careening through the space of this day, giddy with the freedom of not knowing, scared, terrified of failure, yet hoping that there is no such thing as missing your life if you've pulled back the string of your heart and let it all fly true. This next one I've read here a couple times before. Most of you probably heard it. Sometimes things just come to me in fragments, and I really don't rework it. It's just kind of like this little story, this little thing that just shows up, and so it's kind of magical when that happens. This is one of them. I was actually doing a journal page, and I had started doodling, and this just kind of came out, and then I just kept doodling along with the words. It's called Whale Dream. She spoke of whales and mermaids in the dark, longing to see the glitter of sunlight on the surface. And she spoke of one who finally rode to the top on the fluke of a humpback and never went down to the depths, ever again. And I've never seen a whale in person, so I don't know where that came from. This next one is probably the most personal. My mom passed away a couple years ago at the age of, how old was she? 70. She didn't quite make 71. She was a tough old broad, and we didn't get along real great, frankly. But I respected the hell out of her, and it was really hard to watch her go. She was diagnosed at stage 4 cancer, and she had been a nurse, and she wanted nothing to do with chemo or anything. So she wanted to go on her own terms, and she wanted to die in her own bed, and she did. And she also had very specific ideas about what kind of memorial or not that there was going to be, which meant there was not one. My dad and my 2 brothers and I were the only ones who were allowed to be there. Not even our spouses or our kids. So my mother was cremated, and we took her ashes around the family property and put them in various special places that were meaningful to her, and we spoke of her. So it was very simple. I hated it because that's not the way I would do it, But I also, again, I totally respected what she wanted to do. So after we had done that, I came home and wrote this. It's called Funeral Walk. Dad cradled the bag of ashes gently in his upturned palm, as if his fingers were holding a baby's fragile head. He gave us paper cups, and we all scooped them gently into the gray dust, seeing bits of bone and the fine powder, wondering at what becomes of the body once it's been vacated. Uninhabited, the mortgage paid, but the property taxes left undone. We walked the land. The sun streamed down brightly, the mosquitoes fierce for late September. We sprinkled ashes every place we had memories. Her flower gardens, the sledding hills, the view of the old farm, the barn long since burned down. That's where one brother cried the most. Those flames cremated her childhood and ours too. Walking through weeds and tangles, we visited hawk watching spots. The carcass of a tree she used to climb to get high enough to jump onto her father's horse, and the grave of her beloved dog. Then the pond, where I remember her showing us frog eggs in the spring, where she would read atop a granite boulder until the sun got low and her father was angry and worried. Where my brothers and cousins and I spent hours catching snakes and frogs and turtles and getting muddy up to our thighs. We laid her ashes beside the old pines, next to the water where frogs still jump and little blueberry bushes still grow. Where on May days I found grace among the bluet clumps and have never forgotten that love is always here. Finally, we finished the ashes along the trail to home, the house on the hill. We stooped to find turkey feathers and acorns. He received the cups from us and wrapped them in the bag. My youngest brother said he should put it in the wood stove. The chimney would scatter the remains. She now rests where her heart was most at home. Fields, better than a tombstone.
So when Susan asked me if I would do this, I was definitely hesitant.
But I promised myself when I said yes, that I didn't have to write a single new poem. Like, it was okay to not have anything new. But I managed to, had scribbled some stuff down last month? 2 months ago, it was August. And I pulled out those notes last night, and I thought, oh, this isn't too bad, okay. And so I did some editing this afternoon, and I would still call this rough, but here's your new one. I really like to walk Big Pines Beach out on Lake Superior. It's just a wonderful spot, and I just find it very cleansing. And I just love the wind coming over the lake, and it's just kind of dramatic. And Lake Superior is kind of what is a big anchor for me. I can't see across to the other side, so it feels like the ocean. Except that doesn't smell right, of course. So I do a lot of ruminating there, and this poem is about ruminating about some unpleasantness, and it's called Beach Winds, August. My brain is a fog of recriminations and ruminations, grumbling with the fierce humidity of disgust and turmoil. Why curse a man who has no thought of me? He is blinded by the smallness which bites at me, at all of us. The cold depths wash over my ankles, pulling at the rocks. I notice that every stone is a complete masterpiece. I pick up so many and turn them over in my hands. I want to hug them all to my chest. Sand and pebbles roll over my toes. I wish my soul could be rolled smooth by waves. One rock looks meteoric, brown-crusted and green crystalline mystery. It's likely more humble, but I roll around its strangeness and wonder, is it fallen? We are all fallen, all loved. I namaste the horizon, and a white feather lands at my feet. I smile and toss it into the surf, watching it pulled along and under and out of sight. My heart becomes light. I barefoot home. And like every poet on the planet, I occasionally do haiku. There's actually a book out there about writing a haiku a day as a spiritual practice, which I find fascinating. I don't do anything every day, except for the basics, of course. So, because I'm too random for that, but I think it's a lovely idea, and I pulled out a few that I like. This one's called Clothesline. Guessed wrong. Rainstorm came and washed my clean clothes again. Bright drops rinse sunset. This next one's called Bar Light. It's, well, you can maybe tell. Our waitress smiles hello. I wince about last time. Yet she beguiles in bar light. And this last one is weather. I wrote this waiting for my son to get out of school. Shaken from gray clouds, ice crystals dance, salt scattered over French fries. Good. So I figured I had a half an hour. I'm doing good. So I'm also a photographer, and I had printed up some postcards with some of my photography on the back. And so there's two different poems. One of them is the thawing poem that I read earlier, and the other one is the last poem that I always like to end with. And so if you guys would like one, feel free to take one. I'll start it with Frank and pass them around. So I think like a lot of us, when I write, I'm writing to myself, really. I can use you, but you means me. It's stuff I need to hear. And I always figure if I need to hear it, then maybe somebody else, it'll help somebody else too. So this one it helps me anyway. It's called Light Still Dwells in You. This I know to be true. Even when the darkness seems to swallow you whole, when you can't smile, you can't get out of bed, and pain grabs your body, light still dwells in you. You may not see it because you have your eyes screwed shut, fiercely squeezing out everything you fear. But I know it glows inside you. Nothing in the universe can extinguish your light. Fog and night may hide it, but it burns within you. Someday, you will open your eyes to a dazzling dawn. You will breathe in as if for the first time, and you will feel as if this world has always been here, waiting for you to be you.
Thank you very much.
I'm actually gonna ask you to
Sure.
read that one again.
Sure.
Because I got the postcards and I can't multitask.
Sure.
I am giving
So light still dwells in you.
it. Thank you.
This I know to be true. Even when the darkness seems to swallow you whole. When you can't smile, you can't get out of bed, and pain grabs your body, light still dwells in you. You may not see it because you have your eyes screwed shut, fiercely squeezing out everything you fear. But I know it glows inside you. Nothing in the universe can extinguish your light. Fog and night may hide it, but it burns within you. Someday you will open your eyes to a dazzling dawn. You will breathe in as if for the first time, and you will feel as if this world has always been here, waiting for you to be you.
Any questions for Judy? Thank you very much.
Sure, absolutely.
So let's take a 10-minute break and be back for the open mic. Well, welcome back. We'll get to our open mic now, and we have 5 readers. Leading us off is Renee Trilling. Renee?
I enjoyed Judy's reading so much, I didn't want her to stop so soon. Lately I've been digging back into some of the old stuff and kind of seeing if any of it can be salvaged at all. And this one's from 1995, and for no other reason than that, it's called Fugitive. Choppers chug by and drown out the screeching fingernails on the chalkboard of his mind. He has no doubt that the entire world is searching for him. All he needs is a hole big enough to hide in. He whispers, he murmurs, he mumbles, then screams as all of his thoughts pass through his lips. Lighter than air, they hang there, unstrung. Okay, and this is also an older one, because last week I was lucky enough to spend a lot of time with some really good friends, and this is related. This is about another day that I spent with a good friend cross-country skiing, and it's called Goldilocks Day. Imagery surrounds you, for you have the heart and language of a true poet. Bread makers gone crazy left their snowy dough glittering in the trees. Trees open to the tactile experience, secure enough in their treeness to allow themselves to be touched. Trees beautiful in their many adornments of lumpy snow, snow with tails of cats and heads of turtles, somehow resembling duck-billed platypus. Many thanks for a Goldilocks day, not two and not two, but just right. Which leads me to one that I wrote last week. It's called How to Lose an Audience, which is why I had to go first now. Tell them about your leg cramp. Not just a leg cramp, but the worst leg cramp you've ever had in a long history of jumping out of bed, still in a sound sleep, in agony, desperate to find some way to shut the pain off. And we want our pain shut off, not merely masked like Febreze. And I have to give credit to Diane Meyer, that is her phrase. Now tell them again. And if someone walks in the room, begin the story again. Then tell them what you did the day before to cramp that leg. Tell them that you walked miles with your friends to see art. Ah, art. Try to explain what that meant, but you can't. Then tell them about watching people dance spontaneously for the pure joy of it, and seeing that joy reflect in the faces of people who had no idea this joyful surprise would be found on this day, right there in the street. Tell them about swaying to the sound of a man named Lennon and one named Marley. Tell them that peace and joy and brotherhood can still be found right there in the street. Then look around and see if you still have an audience. If you do, start a little beat. Find your best voice. Let it ring. Let it be. Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. Next up is Frank Blissett.
I guess my question to Renee is just who is Art? And are you, if you're okay with it, that's fine. I'm certainly not going to judge, you know. Let's see. The first one I've got, and with all of our construction winding to an end, this is a poem that I wrote when Dave and Lisa Strickland passed on. There was talk about putting a memorial tree out in front of City Hall for them. And I don't know if they have yet, but on the presumption they were going to at some point, I wrote this, which ties into all of our construction. When I was young, the trees had signs. Some did, at least, at the park, or the marina, or in front of the elementary school. And the school had a sign too, with big black letters and a concrete base where we would play tag, or scuff our shoes reaching for the top when the aides weren't watching. They wanted us on flat concrete, or flat paved blacktop, fresh from last fall, when dusty men filled the trench dug out for the new sewer line, replacing old with new, big enough for us to crawl through on hands and knees, and laid with care as per the plan from City Hall. But time wears concrete sure as sand, and sure as new lines age and the next by next street are dug and paved, I now know that some trees have names. This one, for instance, in front of City Hall, is named Dave and Lisa. And speaking of memorials, this next one is actually ended up being a memorial. Someone that I never met, and I just saw it here, so I know it's in here. There it is. And I wrote this years ago, but I just passed on the other week. The old timers in here might remember a picture of Yogi Berra jumping into the arms of Don Larson. And that picture inspired this poem. And Yogi Berra, as most of you know, just passed on the other week. Stocky back built of the great American myth, hunched and wildly swinging with intentional or unintentional wisdom. Then squat cougar low, the thwap of string wound round till leather, hard on soft leather, white on brown leather, stitches spinning, stee, stee, stee. Stocky 8, cougar high, pouncing black and white, first and only, forever and ever, amen. My, how time flies, going, going, gone. 56, 65, 60, 06, stitches spinning, stee, stee, stee. It's over, save for the drying ink of 1,001 aphorisms heard year to year, shore to shore. 1,001 cast-off proverbs, all from the same young lips turned old. Well, that's not entirely true. I never said half the things I really said. Half the things I really said. The unintentional or intentional poetry of a baseball boy. And lastly, I really have not done much writing this summer or fall. Most of my creative juice has been going into recording classic short stories and classic poems for YouTube. I did manage, however, to write a short one here for Judy. I don't remember, you do any spinning at all? I can't remember.
I have, I took
You
a
have.
class, but I'm a lousy spinner.
Well, this is for you anyways.
Thanks.
12.5 seasons spun through my hands, fluff light as air. The creak of petals sliding to my ear, wheel mid-wobble, twine tight and about to bump its knot. 12.5 seasons tight to the spindle and still coming, though getting thin and about to break away. But until then, there's fluff light as air in the crook of my arm. Just thinking about your son there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Now we have Judy Merrill-Smith back reading for Ken Hatfield.
So Ken was kind enough to bring a collection of poems by a good friend of his, Phil Ellsworth, is that right? And I mean, what a treat. You've got a friend who's a poet who sends you poetry all the time. How cool is that? And Ken brought a couple for us to hear. This one is called Let Me Not Be a Nerd. Let me not be inured to wondrous things, to rocks and shady glens where lichen grow, to aspen where October breezes blow, to meadowlarks and yellow siskin wings. Let common usage not betray my eyes and hide the beauty of my time and place, but open up my eyes and give me grace to see the wonder that around me lies. Give me the grace to look and see and care, and not to pass unmoved by wondrous things, as if it made no difference they were there. Wonderful. And this other one's very short. It's called Butterfly. What butterfly disturbed the air and changed the world and swept me where I chanced to see you passing by? Dear butterfly, dear butterfly. Thanks, Ken, for bringing those. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy and Ken, for sharing those. Next, we have Phil Danston.
Thank you for those poems. Wonderful. I have 3 poems. 2 of them are about October. And one is, the first one I'll read is about mothers. It was written around Mother's Day and mother-in-laws. And it's called Expectant. Now you are a mother-in-law to a mother-to-be whose mother hovers in her mothership over the festivities of mothering. Some mothers enjoy roses on the coffee table, petals pawed by that fat cat, litterless, clawless, blossoms recalling quiet mothers, dancing mothers, softly weeping, skillfully sweeping mothers, dithering, smothering, stand by and stand up mothers, buxom, bothersome, love brandishing at dawn mothers. The mother-to-be's girl baby covers her face, rocking in amniotic float, dreaming of her once and future mothering, umbilicals stretching, circling the stars. Pink onesies, crocheted blankies, cross-stitched warp and woof of mother truth, lying strewn like galaxies in black holes. Let's grandfather this grandmothering and savor the eternal nucleic acid transfer. We'll consult the motherboard and the mothers of invention and reduce it to its simplest terms. Mother love trumps all. And my daughter-in-law has given birth to that baby girl. So. The second poem is called Mass. I read it before, I think, and it's about Halloween. And it's called Masks. It's a little bit dated in terms of some of the costumes that kids wear these days, but you can live with that, I hope. It's called Masks. In the beginning, we are afraid of love. At the end, we fear death. Unmasked, twice in our earthy passage, we spend the interval disguising and costuming truth like pallid chameleons blindly crawling from mire to slime. All Hallows Eve, and the half-moon sails overhead, her dark side cloaked in starlight. Headless and shapeless, bloody torsos perch on stone walls. Giant straw men hang upside down in oak trees. Grotesque and oafish, sexless creatures straddle infernal mailboxes, all carving the pumpkin fear deep and wide. It is sweet October rot as I prepare the ritual. Snickers and M&Ms for the vampires, the ghouls, gagas and fools who approach my door. Cyberpunks and freakish lumps of cancerous stumps shout and yawn, clogging my lawn with outstretched claws, their mass sliding across fine young flesh. Fresh from lectures about warm feed and cars in the street, they mumble the required trick or treat into their cavernous bags. I gladly contribute to the dread, dropping a chocolate votive into each sack, my ancient clotting mask settling in for another opaque year, as they chant their callow masks into seamless solidity. I gaze over their sweet shadowed heads and see the true dead. They gather in whispering circles, aching for light. Unasked, unmasked, mutely they approach behind the chattering, scattering children. Young wives, one blonde, one brunette, dead of cancer, husband their cries and whispers. Teachers advance from the other side, lectures cut short, blurred outlines and notes fluttering, pleading for one more session. My stillborn brother, unformed, unscathed by life, whimpers starkly of unstroked skin. Old ones gather behind, wise, weary, asking nothing, enduring the gloom, patient, powerful in their sacramental flow. A frenzied mask, they all crowd the porch, tumbling our sputtering pumpkin, trampling our new grass, clattering against the closing door. October's chill descends upon their mutterings. An eddy of nagging leaves whirls over the ravine, and when I open the door again, the dead are gone, ground fog rising in the trees. I drift into All Souls Day in a guise called sleep. Gaping through my fingers at those plaguing questions, I cement my mask with each repetition of what appalls me most. Is it the death of love, or the love of death that gives such chilling pause? It's depressing. This last poem was not written by me. In fact, it's, I don't know if you listen to Writer's Almanac on NPR. This morning, this is the poem that Garrison Keillor read. It's also accessible online, if everybody knows about that, but it's really a good way to get a poem a day, get your poetry fix every day. And they're usually very good poems and oftentimes relate to what's going on, very topical. This poem was written by Barbara Crooker. Comes from a collection called Small Rain. And the title is Now, and it deals with October. Now. What can I say now that summer's gone, with the weight of its heat, its thick blanket of humidity, the cacophony of zinnias, marigolds, salvia. Now the sky is clear blue and cloudless, that sure one note that can only mean October. You're gone. The leaves turn gold in the calendar's rotisserie, giving up their green, and the burning bushes have ignited, struck their book of matches. It's enough to make the heart break, isn't it? We keep going down the one road. There's no turning back. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next we have Elizabeth Schaefer.
Well, we've definitely got a fall thing going. I have 3 poems. One of them is quite short. 2 of them are about autumn. I also get very poetic with the change of the seasons. And am I loud enough for people? Okay. I taught yoga before I got here, and I have a trouble of wanting to sink down to a quieter voice. So this poem I wrote when I was still in Pennsylvania. Looking at distant hills, clear as the early autumn air that shows them, trees showing just a hint of color, shadows dimming to purple as the sun sinks to the horizon. Here dwells my peace. Crickets accompanying birdsong speaks to the quiet in my soul. To rest after torment, as the autumn relaxes summer's humid grip into the clear breath of harvest, the time we reap what we have sowed. The realization hits me is that of the beauty that I have planted, both here and in my heart, which has struggled with the grief of long-lost dreams and the frightened visions of a future I feared might duplicate the past. But seasons change here on my mountain, and deeper yet, within my heart. Lost indeed is the hope I cuddled, new as an infant in the spring. Gone also the vibrant warmth I seemed to desire in a summer that brought more rain and tears than sun or joy. Yet here, on this quiet autumn eve, I find the peace I had not dreamed to find. Peaceful in the space and distance of green hills and passing days. Content in apples gathered from the very hand of Mother Earth, untended by mortals, graced by nothing short of life itself. As I, despite trauma and mistakes and scattered dreams that float now like the colored leaves against the pain that cools to the purple shadows, to the purple asters, still verdant life, waxing as I wax poetic to the rest of fall, to peace and to the quiet of an autumn eve. At the time I wrote that, when I came home, I ran a women's center in a university. And as well as running the women's center, I provided direct services to victims of violence. So I would come home very weighted. And my time watching the hills was what brought me back to sanity. And so now, just in the last 2 weeks, I'm in a new house. My first new house since I left my beloved hills. And I don't have mountains, but I have these beautiful maple trees that hang over the house, and I get to go outside, and the weather's been absolutely spectacular, I get to go outside and look up at the leaves. And it's just an amazing amount of color. So this one is one that I wrote today. And bear with me because I have not reread it, and I've only done this like once or twice before, and I talk about the fact that sometimes it is good to proofread and edit first. But it seemed pertinent. The fall colors are at their peak. Colors run riot in the woods. A sense of reprieve follows with these mild days as the year winds down, waving a banner of glory as it goes, giving us cause to gasp in awe instead of the gasp of winter's icy blast that steals our breath as well as any solid footing. It is a skater's dance, right now in a crescendo of visual beauty that will switch to the silent glide, or is it slide, in 2 months' time. But I savor each day's offering in a season often too short, seemingly squeezed between summer's apparently endless abundance and the frigid blast waiting just north of us that is already making attempts to warn us of the impending change. Red leaves glow against the stolid evergreen. Yellow flutters down in piles or waves where the once green poplar leaves quivered in the summer breezes. Oranges and maroons festoon the woods as if summer's fire had blazed up in a last chance, a last dance, before the cranes are gone, before the river's still, and before the land turns silent. I always liked the last dance, this last song, which has a poignancy of reminder that no one can move constantly, dance constantly, but that rest too is part of the cycle. And that as dances have fast and slow, and even music has rests, the crescendo would blare if not for the coming quiet, and silence gives meaning to sound. And even the wondrous abundance of summer green becomes a monotony now broken by autumn, which even now will give way to the quieter colors of winter. I have one last one, and we're all going into the past. Every once in a while, as Judy said, you write something and you think, oh man, that's cool. And 10 years later, you still think so. So I wrote this little poem in 1991. In the breath of the morning, I felt a stir as the sun beat down on this crumbling world. A bird awoke and took off with a whir of wings. As I looked at the sky, soft, pearled, enchanting light, the colors glowed and softened as they were. In the breath of the morning, I felt my heart stir.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and we hope to feature Elizabeth next year sometime at one of these poetry cafes.
I was thinking you should do that.
Next, we have Matthew Williams.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to read one from a friend of mine who's definitely not here tonight. Okay, so this is one. So here we go. So it's blindfold on, earplugs in, spin until confusion takes you. Stars moving when balance is gone. Stepping on spikes, being hit with clubs. Why are they so cruel? Why would they do this to me? Take the blindfold off, see rocks beneath your feet, see trees blowing in the wind. take the earplugs out. Hear water running, birds chirping, solitude. Why must trees have such large branches? And why must rocks be so sharp? The world is so cool. Thank you. So I just wanted to read this is about the Wolf Man, and I just watched a bunch of werewolf movies, and then there was what was it? I watched The Howling, and then the next day I watched The Wolf Man, and I went outside and found some sharp plastic teeth on the ground. And then I went up to the college, and then some guy was walking down the hallway with his friend, and he's like, "Everybody's a lone wolf in this world. Nobody's got any friends." Or something. And I was like, "Man, there's so much like wolf-related things on that day." So then I wrote the poem the same day. But it goes, "No one wants to be the father of the wolf man, to meet their son at night with a silver cane in hand. And no one wants to be the mother of a silent crypt, saying farewell prayers to her only boy and saving some for one more. And it is, my little boy, can't you help yourself? Well, my words will soothe and carry you. Gentle rivers fall and wait of a floating heart to warm." That's all I had. Thank you.